And welcome back, Lagos, Nigeria. My guest is Fola Fagbule. He's the co-author of Formation, The Making of Nigeria from Jihad to Amalgamation. Now, before we went on break, we were going to be talking about Uthman Fodio, right? Who you call him the son of the jurist. You also have a chapter that kind of goes into where you call him the incompetent. How did you call him now?
So we talk about the glorious incompetence.
The glorious incompetence.
One of whom is not Uthman Fodio. I have
One
to
of
say.
him is
is multiple British officials.
Right.
That we give that term to.
Okay, so Uthman Fodio had he basically led, the, if you like, the caliphate,
The Fulani Jihad.
The Fulani Jihad back then,
Mm-hmm.
and he had such a large impact on the shaping of the North. I'd like you to kind of talk about it because we start from 1804 and then we go forward. And there's a particular woman that's also part of that history, Nana Asmal, who I would also like us to talk about.
Absolutely.
Over to you.
Absolutely. So we talk about the Sokoto Caliphate from its very origins, from its very inception. And the reason we do that and spend a bit of time on that information is because we think that the formation of that caliphate, that ancient caliphate in the central Sahel, is fundamental to understanding the formation of Nigeria.
Right.
Because what you had prior to the existence of that consolidated caliphate was multiple city-states, independent city-states, that spoke the same language, the Hausa language, and had similar traditions, similar cultures here and there, and very often also had similar religion in terms of Islam, but they were fundamentally independent city-states. And the first time that they became consolidated into one entity, one sort of loosely federated entity, was when the jihad that was led by Uthman Fodio, which started around 1804, when that jihad happened. We talk about that jihad a great deal because if those states had not been consolidated and become the Sokoto Caliphate, which then went on to last for 100 years, you would not presumably have had a consolidated entity for the British to come in and conquer and to utilize its administrative systems and frameworks for governing what then became known as northern Nigeria. So we talk about the origins of the Fulani Jihad. We talk about the key protagonists in the jihad. We talk about quite a few of the battles that happened. We talk about the political environment, and we talk about the impact on the lives of ordinary people. And as well, we talk about Nana
I've got to
Asmal.
interrupt you. We have a call.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. What's your name and where are you calling from, please?
Mr. Kelvin calling from Fola.
Hello, Mr. Kennedy. Go ahead, your question or comment, please.
Yes, Mr. Kelvin calling from Fola. I want to salute the gentleman of the studio there because it has been very difficult finding the material to read about Nigerian history. Because those who think they are wise have hidden the history from every other person. And to think, telling a lie, the truth can never catch up with it. But the fact is the case. In any case, I want to congratulate Nigeria that a book like this is being brought out for people to know. In the first place, you're just man there. How do I get the book to buy?
Okay. Thank you for that question. We'll be announcing that at the end of the show. So stay listening. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Right. So you were talking. I was actually going to ask you, tell us a bit about Uthman Fodio. What his family and what was he like? Because yes, he was a preacher. We've all heard about him. But I think when we look back on history, it's important for us to know the sort of character of the person, of these people that shape so much about us. Go ahead.
So, I mean, he was what we would today call, say, a middle class. He was a member of, say, what we would call a middle class family.
Right.
That were part of the elite in one of the old House estates called Gobir. And like most educated most Muslims generally, he learned the Quran from a very young age,
Right.
reciting it at home with his parents. His father was a very well-respected and educated person. In fact, the reason he came to be known as Danfo Fodio, Uthman son of the jurist. Danfodio means the jurist, was because of his father, who was a well-known and well-educated individual in Gobert. And so he learned the Quran at home, and then continued his studies and continued into Islamic jurisprudence, understanding the history of Islam, understanding prior Islamic caliphates and emirates that existed elsewhere in the world, understanding the essence of the religion and the meaning of Sharia and all of that. And he began to preach. He began to use his knowledge to speak to others and to preach in his neighborhood, and began to build a following because he was articulate and he was eloquent and he had a lot to say, and his personal lifestyle also was. Shall we take another call?
Yes, let's take a call. Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon. What's your name and where are you
afternoon,
calling from, please?
Yes, my name is Kelvin. I'm calling from Ikorodu.
Hello, Kelvin. Welcome to Danfo Conversations. Your comment or question, please.
Yes, ma'am. I must say I'm enjoying the program, and I'm enlightened, I must say. I feel so bad that history has been taken away from, the educational sector, and it's terrible. Although I've been looking forward to this program, ma'am, and I must say I'm enjoying it already.
Thank you.
About history, is there a way we can talk about it more? Because we want to get to listen to, history on radio, and I like that this is coming up because history plays a very, very big role in our society today. Going down memory lane, picking up some pieces that can help us in our present times and also the future. So I think history really plays a big role. And please, ma'am, we need more of this. We need more of this. And about the book, I would love to have details about the book as well, ma'am.
Okay.
So
all right.
Thank you so much for bringing this up, ma'am.
Thank
God
you.
bless you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so very quickly, the book is published by Cassava Republic Press. You can go on their website and order from there. Actually, we have a surprise for all of you later. Stay listening because they've been kind enough. Like Fola probably had to convince them to give us 2 copies, which will be given away at the end of the show, but not yet. So stay listening. Fola, go ahead. You were saying.
Yes. So
we're talking about the character of Uthman himself.
Uthman was a
middle class,
a charismatic preacher who built up a following. In the same way that you will find, charismatic individuals and preachers even today begin to build up a following amongst the populace, people who admired his lifestyle and admired what he had to say about social justice and about the inequality and the injustice that people were facing in the Hausa city-states, and so the following began to grow, and over a period of time, he became notable enough that even the ruling elite and the king of the state in which he lived also got to know about him and wanted to meet him, and indeed he spent a bit of time in the royal court. Providing advice and being a part of the advisors of the king. As it turned out, he was quite, what we would say, he was quite strict and rigid about his adherence to Islam. And he was very focused on following the true, pure Islam, which was not the case with many of the ruling elite at the time. And so he fell out over a period of time with the king of his country, and departed from the court. And then eventually tensions began to build between his followers and the followers of the traditional ruling elite in the Hausa state. It turned out that because he was Fulani by ethnicity, a lot of his original supporters and followers were amongst the Fulani elite in the state. They were amongst the merchants and the educated class, the ones who did have some means and who were important people in the society.
Which would have been important, of course.
Yes. And they began to support him, and they probably began to see an opportunity to take over the state and to establish.
We've got lots of calls coming in. Hello. Hello, what's your name and where are you calling from, please?
Madam, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm from Kogi.
Pardon?
I'm calling from Kogi.
Your name, please? I need you to speak a little bit louder, please. Okay. You're calling from Ikoyi? Oh, the call. We've lost the call. Hello?
Hello,
Welcome.
Good afternoon, ma.
Good afternoon. What's your name and where are you calling from, please?
It's Mike from Makoka.
Okay. Oh, M.I. Hello. How are you?
Fine. Good afternoon, Uncle Fola.
Hello, good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm a big fan of. I was waiting all week for the show, and yeah, I'm so glad that it's on air finally.
Excellent.
Great work you do with the book. I'm certainly going to get my copy. I've heard so much about it. I was live streaming John Roving Heights, and I'm certainly going to get my copy. So, but quick one question I want to ask. Right, for me, young people like me, to some extent, you're preaching to the choir because we have a privilege to have history in our background, right? But for those that don't understand the etymology of wars and rivers in Nigeria, can you tell them if those kind of wars are still been, have they really ended? Have those wars ended? When you talk about Uthman Danfo, you talk about are those wars, have they ended in Nigeria? Or is this be going on under different guys? If you get my question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's an interesting...
Thanks, M.I.
It's an interesting question. And part of the reason we wrote the book is because, we wanted to understand the beginning. We wanted people to understand the beginning of things. One of the quotes that we like of Chinua Achebe talks about you have to know where the rain began to beat you if you want to get, dry. It's important to understand where the rain began to beat you in the first place. And so we wanted to go back to the beginning of things. And it is true that many of the crises and many of the conditions that exist in many different parts of Nigeria, even today, have their origins in events that happened or that began in pre-colonial Nigeria. We talk a lot about crises around access to land, access to water, access to grazing fields, and so on and so forth, that continue to disturb us today, that continue to exist today. And many of these had their origins in pre-colonial Nigeria, and in formation we do provide the background for a lot of that.
I'm going to read your tweets in a moment. Just give me 1 second before we go, because it's amazing. The time is going so fast. I can't believe it. Now, so we were talking about Uthman Fodio. I need you to talk about Nana Asmal, who was effectively the Minister of Education kind of thing.
Yes, she was one of his daughters.
Yes.
She was well educated. She was a very important personality who ultimately got married to one of the leading people in the court of Uthman, of the son of Uthman Fodio, who became the first caliph of the Sokoto Caliphate. So she was extremely important in terms of education generally, but women's education in particular. She was a writer, she was an author, she was a custodian of a lot of the history of the Caliphate. In fact, a lot of the information that we have today, we only have because of archival work that she did and writings that she put together. And so she was an extremely influential figure in the early Sokoto Caliphate. We describe her and her husband as the hands of the king. They were very important in assisting the king in ruling effectively a very, very large state, which was the largest state of its kind that had existed in this part of the world when it was formed.
Is it safe to say Uthman Fodio was something of a male feminist back in that time? Well, because you see, when people talk about the, even just on the other day on a group, they were saying, we didn't have feminists in Nigeria, we didn't have women who do these things, etc., etc. And here we are talking about Aminu Asmal, who was educated, who went around educating women and empowering women with knowledge, and a sense of freedom and ownership.
Yeah, I wouldn't
like.
go as far as calling Uthman Fodio a male.
But he certainly did.
He certainly
impact.
had what you would call liberal views.
That's
about,
right.
at least for the time, about the role of women in society at a time when it was not always the case that people understood the importance and the fact that women ought to have the same exact kind of role in society as anyone else. So, for example, he believed in women education, and his daughter was educated, and several of his daughters were educated. And as we point out in the book, his only requirement was that male and female congregants sit separately while he taught all of them at the same time. So you can say, liberal attitudes for the time. But I don't think you'd go as far as
I would be too generous to
yes,
call him
that would be quite generous, I think.
Now, before we leave the Uthman, there's a verse that I come to that's called Buhari versus Atiku.
Yes.
I thought it was so smart.
Absolutely.
I want, and of course, immediately people are thinking, oh my God, really? Well, yes, because their first, if you like, fight was some 100 years before they met in the second. On page 53, you talk about Buhari versus Atiku, and you said the first contest between two men named Abubakar Atiku and Muhammadu Buhari for the highest office in Nigeria took place in 1837, following Sultan Bello's death. Unlike the eponymous contest nearly 2 centuries later, Atiku came out on top, succeeding his brother as the Sultan of Sokoto. I'm going to leave it there. Over to you.
I mean, so to this particular fact, we owe Fei's eye for spotting this.
I hope Fei is going to call. Fei, are you listening to us? Please call in if you are.
Call. So he spotted this in a lot of the history books that we were reading, and we found it to be one of those interesting facts. That in two individuals with the exact same names had both contested for the highest office in their country, which was to become the second caliph of the Sokoto Empire in 1837, and Atiku came out on top.
He won that time round.
So we found it a very interesting coincidence in terms of just names. Yeah,
excellent. We have a call? No, okay. All right, let's continue. Now, let's move on because we're running out of time. So now we're going to talk about the caliphate in session. Oh, we have a call. Sorry. We have a call. No, it's cut off. Please call back. Yes, we can't hear you. Sorry. Call back. Right. So the caliphate. Oh.
Hello.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Hello. Good afternoon. What's your name and where you're calling from, please?
Mr. Benjamin. I'm calling from Amu.
Hello, Mr. Benjamin. Go ahead. Your question or comment, please.
I've been listening to the program on air now. Unfortunately, I didn't join when you started, so I'm kind of lost. What book are you analyzing?
Okay, we're talking about Nigeria history, and I have with me the author of a book called Formation, The Making of Nigeria from Jihad to Amalgamation. All right? Thank you for your call. Let me go to text, to tweets. Right. I think we have a tweet earlier that came in. Right. So I have a tweet. What effect? Oh, no, right. Here we go. Please, I would love that you talk about the Nigerian history without being politically correct and biased. This program will shake Nigeria and even enlighten the older folks. Well, we're not being politically correct. We're taking it straight from the book. So please keep listening. Right. I have another comment from at Wazilas. Yeah, Wazilas. Can you please suggest ways in which our young generation could preserve their history? Ooh, Shay, do you want to take that, Fola?
Well, that's a difficult
It
question.
is.
I have to say.
That's why I threw it at you.
I mean, I think it's easier for history to be preserved these days because of social media and because a lot of what we're doing is being recorded in real time, one way or another. But that's not sufficient.
Yeah.
I don't think. I think we do have to be very deliberate in curating the experiences of the present generation of people. And it's a lot of work that needs to go into that. Sort of culture curators, folks who are attentive to how things are changing and what the zeitgeist is in terms of what young people think about, and how the thinking of young people is influencing the evolution of society. So I think that's a huge amount of work on its own that needs to happen.
Thank you. We're going to go on a break and we'll be right back.
This is Danfo Conversations with Ireti Bakare.
99.3 Nigeria Info. We'll be right back.
In the beginning was the word, and the word.
Online and offline training between Lagos and Paris. Film Lab Nigeria, Wazobia Academy, and LAFAC, the digital learning platform for creative industries, present an innovative training on television series fundamentals, script writing skills, creative independent skills for experienced writers and young professionals in the Nigerian audiovisual industry. Learn principles and techniques of series script writing. Registration is now on at wazobia.academy. Contact Project Coordinator on 0908 897 5611. Email coordinator@wazobia.academy. Powered by LAFAC, with support from the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the French Embassy in Nigeria.
Hi there. If anyone ever asks you for your banking app, password or PIN, your card PIN or the 3 numbers on the back of your card, your pay ID or answers to your security questions, do not give it to them. These details are private and highly confidential. They must never be shared. Stay smart. Don't lose your money to scammers. This message is from Kuda Microfinance Bank, the bank of the free. Download Kuda on the Play Store or the App Store and open an account to enjoy free banking.
Female genital mutilation is an assault on the bodily integrity of girls and women. And no, it's not practiced only in northern Nigeria. In fact, southwestern states account for 47.5% of all cases in Nigeria. This Easter holiday, I am asking you to stand up for girls and women. Report every plan to mutilate a girl child or a woman. A girl does not need to be circumcised. There is nothing to circumcise. Stop. Don't cut that girl.
The new normal is here and the show goes on non-stop with AY Live on Easter Sunday, virtual edition, happening from Eco Hotels with a limited and approved audience on April 4th and transmitted to a worldwide audience online. Streaming live on ariseplay.com for Nigeria, at a worldwide audience on quicknet.com. Get ready to experience AY Live virtual edition from the comfort of your homes with undiluted dramatic entertainment and unlimited back-to-back comedy timeout with AY. I Could Die, Gordons, Shay J-Lo, Destoka, Acapella, Mr. Paul, Aproco, and lots more. Musicals from the biggest rave-making kings in the industry. Venue, Echo Hotels, and your comfort zone. Time, red carpet, 5 p.m. Show starts at 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. You can get your tickets online at www.aylive.tv. For inquiries and sponsorship, call 0806-139-7264. AY Live Virtual Edition, in conjunction with Echo Hotels and Suites, is powered by Revolution Plus Property, Coleman Wires, and Midas Interior. Supported by Mini-Me, packaged by Lanre Maku Events. Proudly supported by Cool Wazobia Info FM.
I am Simone Cipriani.
And I'm Claire Press.
You are listening to the Ethical Fashion Podcast.
Get ready for another season of the EFI podcast series.
Change starts at the grassroots level from the collective efforts of people.
Premiering this Friday. And with Africa at its heart, this 12-episode series will explore topics relevant today more than ever.
The systems that we live in are operating with 100% efficiency to how
through the voice of African creatives and leaders. Hosted by Simone Cipriani and Claire Press, the series explores issues driving the conversation around ethical fashion. The discussions featuring African leaders and creatives range from female power and wildlife conservation to African entrepreneurship. Right here on 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.
Female genital mutilation is an assault on the bodily integrity of girls and women. And no, it's not practiced only in northern Nigeria. In fact, southwestern states account for 47.5% of all cases in Nigeria. This Easter holiday, I am asking you to stand up for girls and women. Report every plan to mutilate a girl child or a woman. A girl does not need to be circumcised. There is nothing to circumcise. Stop. Don't cut that girl.
Welcome back to your number one talk, news, and sports station. This is Nigeria Info.
99.3 Nigeria Info. Depend on us for the best in talk.
99.3 Nigeria Info, biggest.
Keeping you updated on latest news.
Somebody is saying they own the mint. So the government just go to the mint and print money and then everyone stand on the land. They share it.
Latest developments locally and internationally. From politics to business, sports, and so much more. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk. In the heart of Lagos. The headline news on 99.3 Nigeria Info.
99.3 Nigeria Info. You're listening to the news headlines at 2. Air Force says missing aircraft may have crashed. Poland expresses desire to help Nigeria tackle insecurity. One COVID-19 related death recorded in the last 24 hours. While Minister of State for Health, Dr. Olorunibe Mamara, says President Muhammadu Buhari's achievements in the health sector are underreported. Voter registration exercise to resume on June 28th. Minister of Communication and Digital Economy, Issa Pantami, says Nigerians without a national identity number risk going to jail for between 7 and 14 years. Lagos State Police Command deploys thousands of officers to secure places of worship, recreation facilities, and financial institutions this Easter period, while Governor Dapo Abiodun of Ogun State inaugurates Amotekun Corps. Finally, 4 arrested after Soludo attack. Those are the headlines here at 99.3 Nigeria Info. I'm Yvonne Ohaifo.
Nigeria Info, your number one for news. Always spot on, fresh and direct on 99.3 Nigeria Info.
This is Danfo Conversations with Ireti Bakare.
Hello and welcome back to Danfo Conversations. I'm still in conversation with my conductor today, Fola Fagbule. Fola, thank you for spending you're here till the end of the show, right? So keep your calls coming in, please. We have, I think I read a message out on Twitter. There's a message here that says, what effect is the removal of history from school curriculum having on the Sorosuke generation? Now, I also have a very good message, or rather question for you. It's from Auntie Yemisi Ransom Kuti. She writes, can you please ask the author what he thinks about the role of climate change in the developments in Nigeria, particularly with reference to the current unrest around Fulani herdsmen?
From Mrs. Ransom Kuti, and by the way, we write
Miss
Ransom Kuti.
Yes.
We write a bit about I believe her ancestor Olufumilaya Ransom Kuti.
That's right.
In the book, and her ancestor
aunt, yes,
as well. And it was fascinating just tracing their evolution as a family from way back. To her question, it's an interesting question. One of the things we spot in formation is the state, for example, of Lake Chad in the 19th century. And we do quote some first-hand accounts of what the environment, what the aquatic environment was like on Lake Chad when it was visited by foreigners for the first time sometime in the 1800s. And we also talk about the impact of, even at that time, the beginnings of desertification in the Sahel, from the Sahara all the way down into the middle area of Nigeria.
Yeah.
The impact of that on resource availability, and the impact of that on violence and crisis amongst communities.
Yes.
And so that's a part of, and that crisis didn't begin today, and that's a part of the history of Nigeria. And it has accelerated, obviously, with climate change, and will continue to accelerate. And not just with climate change, but also with urbanization and with the change in the structure of the economy from being focused on agriculture to there being other means by which money can be made and exports can be generated, and that leaves a lot of people behind.
Okay.
So the problem is multifaceted. Yes, it's climate change, but it's also the economic structure of the country.
Yeah. And very quickly, because we've got to move on, we're so running out of time. So when people talk about the Fulani herdsman issue right now, if you mention about climate change and the impact of climate change having been part of the causal effect of that issue, people tend to dismiss it. Can you bring that to today? Are you able to, as a historian, or I know you don't like to call yourself a historian, but having written this?
Yeah, I mean, I can only talk about what what we came across in history. I'm not an expert in security matters or what's happening in the north of Nigeria today, so I can't speak specifically to that. But I do know that from what we've seen in the history, there were indications of the beginnings of these kinds of crises. But I always say that it's not one thing, and so perhaps some of the people who are dismissive of the idea that it is one thing that is the source of all of this, because it's not, and it's always dangerous when you oversimplify something and call it the result of just one factor, because there's so many factors, including governance and including economic structure, like I mentioned, including historical antagonisms between communities, and so on and so forth, that have played a role and are playing a role.
Now, let's talk about your chapter, The Glorious Incompetence, because I have to. This is the part where we go into Biafra. It's called The Invasion of Biafra. And I'll just read a few lines. It says here, early in December 1901, nearly 100 years after the mad white men first appeared on the Niger, the first invasion of Biafra began. More than 80 heavily armed Europeans, organized into 4 separate columns, supported by 2,100 black equipment carriers and 1,550 soldiers, commenced on an expedition into the heart of the densely forested enclave hinterland adjacent to the eastern banks of the Niger.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
So we call this the first invasion of Biafra. Obviously, acknowledging the subsequent invasion of Biafra that happened more than 60 years later. We found this very interesting because what had existed in that part of the country prior to this invasion was, independent communities living in relative independence. Independent communities really living in relative isolation, I should say, from the rest of the country. And they had lived in that manner for hundreds of years. They had a highly developed system, cultural system by which they operated. They had their judicial system. They had their oracle, which we talk about, the Arochukwu oracle that was extremely important. They had a system of governance that was dominated by the Aro Confederacy. And they had existed for hundreds of years in this manner. They were extremely influential in the slave trade. And we describe the state of affairs in the Igbo country. And this was the first time that outsiders were forcing their way into the country. And so we talk about the backstory of how that invasion was possible, what made it possible. We talk about the economic factors that affected the situation. We talk about the political factors that affected the situation. And we talked about the character of the individuals, particularly the British administrators that were making this decision to invade this previously independent country. And we call them the glorious incompetents because a lot of their decision making was really poor. A lot of the things that they did were quite unnecessary and considered quite unnecessary even by contemporary observers. It's not even Fei and I. If you think about the words and the reports and the enquiries by contemporary superiors and watchers who were like, what the hell are you guys doing? And we talk about some of those really terrible decisions. The invasion of Biafra was one of those. The invasion of the Benin Empire, the invasion of Benin City was one of those. It was terribly unnecessary. And we talk about just how disastrous the outcomes of these invasions were.
Okay, we've jumped a little, but I need you to talk about the Oyo Empire because I'm so conscious of time. It's such a shame. If only we had more time. Talk about the Oyo Empire very briefly, and then we can move on to, the undesirable or desirable, if you like. That is Frederick Lugard.
Yeah. So, I mean, we talk a lot about the Oyo Empire just the same way we talk about the Sokoto Caliphate, because it was an important existing organization that influenced the structure of modern Nigeria. And in fact, in the case of the Sokoto Caliphate, what you had was that the consolidation of previously independent people into a caliphate influenced the creation of Nigeria. What you had with the Oyo Empire was that the disintegration of the previously centralized governing authority into multiple competing powers in the Yoruba country also influenced the evolution of Nigeria in the direction of British influence. So we talk about the spectacular secession of Afonja from the Oyo Empire. Afonja, the ruler of Ilorin, and how he seceded from the country that his ancestors had helped to build because he was a prince of the Oyo Empire. And we talk about the political and economic factors that led to that secession. And we talk about how that secession, because Ilorin was the most powerful sub-state within the Oyo Empire at the time, how that secession triggered a huge crisis across all aspects of the Oyo country. Because if you think about it, if your most powerful sub-state decides to go on its own, and not only decides to go on its own, but decides to ally itself with people from another country,
of course,
it has a huge impact on your ability to remain in control of the places that you previously controlled. And that's exactly what happened to the Oyo Empire. It disintegrated, and there was a lot of fighting and wars. And then ultimately, the Ilorin itself, which had allied itself with the Sokoto Caliphate in order to wrest itself away from Oyo's rule, was itself then dominated and incorporated into the Sokoto Caliphate. It became one of the last places to be added to the Sokoto Caliphate, alongside the Nupe later on. So we see how that disintegration of Oyo led to the evolution of the city-state called Abeokuta, who were previously themselves subject to the Oyo, but then became independent after the secession of Ilorin. And we see how they immediately set up themselves and organized themselves to be allied with the British, because it was extremely important. It was an existential issue for them. They were surrounded by enemies in Dahomey, enemies in Oyo, enemies among the Jebu. So they were surrounded by enemies, and if they were going to survive, they needed to be allied with a very, very strong foreign power. And the British fulfilled that role for Abeokuta.
Excellent. One of the things that I love in the book is how, you talk about the trade, the three types of trade that took place. And up until now. So you had the human trade, which is 1770. You had the palm oil trade, which is 1870, and then you have today's crude oil, which is which was found in 1970. And where do we go in 2070? I think it was Faye that said that.
We talked about that on the podcast.
Yeah, on the podcast, it's like what's going to happen in 2070. We may not have the answer to that right now, but before we even get there, let's talk about Lugard because we don't have much time.
So Lugard was a British administrator who, in our view anyway, has gotten way more credit than he deserves as far as the Nigeria story is concerned. And the reason for that is because he was married to a newspaper editor who named Flora Shaw. She was an extremely important and influential person in the UK, in the British media system. She was highly influential. She was well connected. She knew a lot of people. She was friends with George Goldie, who was the one who employed Lugard to come to Nigeria in the first place. She was friends and very close. In fact, she was a lover of George Goldie, as we point out in the book. She was very close to Winston Churchill, who at the time was a young upcoming politician in the British politics. She was very close to all the leading players. And so partly because of this, and also because of the nature of his own very strong and stubborn character, and the fact that he was a relentless self-promoter, Lugard elevated himself into the position of being, in theory, the most knowledgeable person and the most influential person on all things Nigeria, as far as the British were concerned. And then he burnished those credentials by when he was sent out to create something called the West Africa Frontier Force. He burnished his credentials by being a very good, strong soldier, a very disciplined soldier. He was also a writer, and he wrote about everything that he did. That was also very good for him. And when he ultimately was given the support and the mandate by the British government to go and take over what was historically a private company called the Royal Niger Company in modern-day Nigeria, he went there and then on his own initiative, for the most part, began to conquer adjacent states, previously independent states, like the Sokoto Caliphate.
Ambitious young man.
He was quite an ambitious individual. He was an imperialist, and he was one who believed that it was their duty, was their right to conquer anyone that they could in the area. And so he did conquer the Sokoto Caliphate and created the country that then became known as Northern Nigeria. And that became his most important achievement, really, up to that time in his life. We talk about how ultimately he was removed from Northern Nigeria by the actions of indigenous peoples who revolted against British rule. And we talk about the circumstances that led to Lugard's departure from Northern Nigeria. But because he was such a relentless self-promoter and he had such an influential wife, he continued to be relevant. And ultimately, when the decision was made to consolidate a country that had then been formed and called the Protectorate of Southern Nigeria, and to amalgamate that with Northern Nigeria, the decision was taken to appoint him as the individual who would come back to do that. And so he came back to Nigeria after a period of time that he had spent in Hong Kong as the governor of Hong Kong.
That's right.
And then we talk about the rest of his career and how he was then again removed from Nigeria a second time by strong opposition, violent opposition ultimately to his rule in Nigeria. And so we try to recontextualize the life and career of Lugard in Nigeria, because we did think that it had gotten way more credit than it deserved.
You know, one of the things when one listens to your podcast, and you can listen to their podcast, Lagos, just Google the name and it will come up. When you start your podcast, your first episode makes me laugh, where you said, there was an argument going on Twitter and about, how it was Florence Shaw who named Nigeria. So how did we end up with Nigeria?
So Nigeria is named after the river Niger.
That's right.
I mean, that much is clear to everyone, I think, and it's not debatable. The question is, how did the Niger get its name? I mean, Flora Shaw was the first person who, in a newspaper article that she wrote, I forget the exact date, but in the late 1800s, she wrote a newspaper article in which she referred to this Niger area as Nigeria, that it may be more properly known as Nigeria. But there is evidence that was not the first time that people were referring to this area as Nigeria. By the way,
so she had referred to it as
referred to it in writing.
Nigeria area.
The Niger area, which we may
yes.
which we may now properly call Nigeria,
Yes.
she said.
Uh-huh.
And she used that term in a newspaper article in the late 1800s. I think it was 1896 or something like that. And the importance of it is that she wrote it down and it was published. And so she was acknowledged as one of the first people to start using that term. But the term was already being used by other people, perhaps not as prominent people as Flora Shaw. And so she became credited because of that newspaper article with having named the country.
Right.
The name Niger itself is a name that goes back way back into antiquity, even before the slave trade, even before significant amounts of interaction between Europeans and Africans. It's a name that we talk about the etymology in formation, but goes back to a Tuareg expression, river of rivers. Because the river was so important and loomed so large in the lives of the people around it. And so Niger means in an ancient language, river of rivers. And then that became the dominant name for that river. And then ultimately, as I say, Flora Shaw was the first person to then use the term Niger area, or more properly known as Nigeria, in writing.
So, time again. Nigeria is now formed. By the time we get to the end of the whole Lugard conversation, Nigeria is formed, and you take, because the book ends, at World War One. Now, tell us, one of the things that we do, we don't realize actually, is how these other events that were happening outside of Nigeria was shaping us.
Absolutely.
Indirectly, and World War One was one of those.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
So World War One changed the world entirely in so many ways that we cannot talk about on this show, and the amount of time we had.
Yeah.
And Nigeria was no different. Nigeria was extremely impacted by the war. Nigeria had, for the most part, barely been conquered by the British at the time the war broke out. And most of the people that were required for doing the conquering and the governing of this new British territory had to go and fight in Europe against the Germans and against all the powers that were contending for global supremacy at the time. And so the local people looked around them and noticed that the oppressor and the conqueror is busy with other things, is occupied, and is not so powerful anymore. And guess what? They began to revolt.
Right.
And we covered this in Formation, how revolts began to break out across the country. Multiple revolts. I don't think we do even sufficient justice to it in the book in terms of the number of revolts that broke out, violent revolts that broke out across the country, because local people figured out that the Europeans were weak right now.
Yeah.
And they actually did try to get rid of them in their entirety.
Yeah.
And it's one of those interesting what ifs of history to say if they had been weakened any further in that war, what would have happened in a place like Nigeria. As it turned out, they were able to rally themselves and organize themselves to put down these revolts. There were certain consequences. For example, Lugard's departure from Nigeria was on account of one of these revolts, which was quite bloody.
His bosses were not happy with him.
And his bosses were not happy with him because that particular revolt was triggered by him introducing a new tax system that he had been warned against introducing because it was foreign and alien to the area and was not how people did things. And he introduced it, and that created a lot of crisis, which ultimately led to a violent revolt, which then ended up with him being removed ultimately from Nigeria.
Okay. I'm going to read, before we go on break, I'm going to read comments from Twitter very quickly. It says here, from Ayobe, being a history buff, I'm enjoying, Cecile Gaze Danfo Conversations. Thank you so much. What does he say? Though apparently aimed at young person, it's interesting and informative to read. Oh, he's talking about your book. There you go. Next comment.
She asks, but has history not been restored to our school curriculum? I'm not sure I know the answer to that question.
Yes. Well, it has in 2019.
Excellent.
But, as to what extent and whether it's core, because I think that's what happens. If you don't make it core, it's not like you couldn't
Learn it
study
before, yeah.
before. It's just that it wasn't core, and I think one of the things that must happen now is it has from primary school actually.
Yeah, and it's also important for the curriculum itself to be right. You know,
Yes,
are we
there you
teaching
go.
the right history?
There you go. There you go. I think one of the things when I was doing my research about why it was removed, one of the things that I read about was how several people couldn't agree on what version of especially Biafra to talk about and what happened and stuff.
That's unfortunate.
It's yeah. So are we going on break now? We're concluding. No. Okay, let me question. Right, we have 2 books to give away. 2 books, cut, and I'm gonna get Fola to sign them before he goes. Faye, unfortunately, is in here, so if you like, Faye will sign it. Actually, I say invisible pen in spirit. So, Fola, do you have a question? Do you want to drop one question
for the audience?
Yes, and then we have another question.
We have a call coming through.
Oh, there's a call. Very quickly. Hello, you've got like 1 minute. Very quickly. What's your name and where you calling from, please? Okay. Oh, another one's coming in.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, you've got 1 minute. What's your name and where you calling from, please?
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Fola and Ireti. My name is Chisom.
Hello, Chisom.
Yes, I great show, by the way. I listened to Fola when he talked about the River Niger.
Mm-hmm.
And I was taught in primary school that it was discovered by someone named Mongo Park. So I thought it was interesting that he didn't mention Mongo Park. So what's the place of Mongo Park?
So this is an example of
River Niger.
Right. So
this is an example
he's answering it for you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is an example of when I say we need to teach the right history.
Yes.
Because I was also taught in school about this individual named Mongo Park who allegedly found it, but obviously he didn't, discover anything because the Niger
was already there.
Was exactly. But he was the first person from his country to visit the Niger,
right,
and to return safely, having visited it.
Oh, we have to go. I think we're going to have to put the questions on the website or on the handle. If you want to. We do have 2 books to give away. Unfortunately, we're having too much of a good time. But quickly, drop your question. You drop a question.
So, a question for the audience is something we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Someone, please tell us the origin of the term the Niger. Okay,
the origin of the term the Niger. My handle is at Cisioge Lagos, or you can send it to at Nigeria Info 99.3 FM. It's the first one that comes in, or the first 2 that comes in, you get the book, okay? And we'll get your details. Fola, I don't even know what to say. I wish we could have you back. I'm going to see. Maybe I'm asking my producer. I'm looking at my guy here, if I can have Fola back. But this is not going to be the end of it because this is such a fabulous book. And I think this maiden edition has been so rich as a result of your work that there's no way I'm not going to have you back. So thank you so very much.
Well, thank you
thank
very
you
much
to
for
you.
having us.
Thank you to Faye. Thank you to Cassava Republic. Look, Lagos, the book is called Formation, the Making of Nigeria, from Jihad to Amalgamation. You can get it from Cassava Republic Press website. Thanks for that. And that's the end of the first edition of Danfo Conversations. Keep talking.
Thank you very much.
Join us next week for another ride. Danfo Conversations.
99.3 Nigeria Info. We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it happens. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.
Hello there and welcome.